What did the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, recently say about power plant emissions?
In 2004, the EPA estimated that every year about 2,800 people die from lung cancer and another 3,200 have heart attacks as a direct result of pollutants from power plants.
What is a wedge tornado?
A wedge tornado is one that appears as a thick, squat column. The observable height of the funnel is about the same as the width.
What is the origin of the word monsoon?
The word monsoon comes from the Arabic word mawzan, meaning season.
What was the air quality like in 19th century London?
Words can barely describe how bad air pollution was during the late 19th century in London, England. Coal was burned in excess, and the soot and sulfur dioxide that resulted is blamed for a shockingly increased mortality rate among infants. Indeed, it is estimated that about 50% of the children born in London at the time failed to live past the age of 2. So much sunlight was blocked by coal dust that people suffered from lack of vitamin D, with the result being a rise in rickets. And, of course, respiratory ailments were rampant.
What is the Kyoto Protocol?
An international agreement initiated by the United Nations, the Kyoto Protocol is a document that aims to reduce global emissions worldwide in an effort to stem and eventually reverse global warming. Adopted on December 11, 1997, the agreement has been signed by representatives from 184 nations. A central aspect of the Kyoto Protocol is establishing scheduled reductions in emissions, reducing greenhouse gases relative to 1990 levels by 5% over the course of the years 2008 through 2012. Countries participating in the agreement can earn emissions-reducing credits by either reducing pollutants produced in their own countries or through a carbon market, which is a system of emissions trading. In other words, a country that wishes to allow more emissions within their borders can purchase emissions credits from countries with lower levels and still be in compliance with the treaty. Countries can also earn credits by sponsoring emissions-reducing programs in foreign nations or building clean factories and power plants in other countries.
Where can I find reliable climate statistics online?
There are many websites about the weather available on the internet, some are better than others. You can get lots of information from government websites, such as the National Weather Service at http://weather.gov and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration at http://www.noaa.gov. There are also some online databases available. World Climate at http://www.worldclimate.com is a searchable online database that includes more than 85,000 climate statistics from all over the world. By typing in the name of a city, you can obtain data concerning rainfall and temperature. Weatherbase at http://www.weatherbase.com has information on nearly 16,500 cities around the world. It even lets you pick whether you want to see statistics in metric or US units.
How big is the hole in the ozone?
In 2007 the ozone hole was measured to be 9.3 million square miles, 24 million square kilometers, in size. But this was a smaller hole than the record, set in September 2006, when the ozone hole was a gaping 10.6 million square miles, 27.5 million square kilometers, in area.
What is a turtle?
In terms of meteorology, the word turtle does not refer to a shelled reptile. Rather, they are sturdy encased instruments that can be placed in the path of a tornado to measure air pressure, humidity, and temperature. Unfortunately, they cannot measure wind speeds, but they do gather this other valuable data.
What is a heavy snow warning?
A heavy snow warning is issued when the National Weather Service expects an accumulation of 4 inches, 10 centimeters, or more within a 12-hour period. Heavy snow warnings differ from blizzard warnings in that they do not depend on strong winds for an advisory to be issued.
What is a tropical depression?
A tropical depression consists of a line of organized storms with wind speeds below 38 miles, 61 kilometers per hour. Tropical depressions have the potential to become tropical storms or hurricanes.
Which ocean currents are the slowest?
The slowest currents are found deep in the world's oceans. These sluggish, cold waters take up to about 1,000 years to circulate around the entire globe.
What caused a temporary but dramatic change in climate in 1816 called the year without a summer?
On April 10, 1815, Mount Tambora erupted on the Indonesian island of Sumbawa. After what some scientists believe was a period of inactivity of about 5,000 years. The massive blast shot an estimated 24 cubic miles, 100 cubic kilometers, of rock and 220 million tons. 199.54 billion kilograms, of sulfur dioxide, almost 29 miles, 40 kilometers, into the atmosphere. Everything within 400 miles, 645 kilometers, of the blast was plunged into near total darkness. Tsunamis reaching 16 feet, 5 meters, in height crashed onto surrounding shorelines. After the initial eruption, the volcano continued to erupt through mid-July. To make matters worse, 2 previous volcanic eruptions also contributed to dust and debris being thrown into the Earth's atmosphere. The volcano Soufriere Saint Vincent erupted in the Caribbean in 1812. And 2 years later Mayon volcano exploded in the Philippines. In addition to all this volcanic activity, there was an increase in sunspot activity, including one particularly large sunspot that was so big it could be seen with the naked eye. All of these events conspired to lower temperatures dramatically all over the planet. Canada, Europe, and the United States were all very hard hit, particularly in the East and Midwest, where crop failures were extensive in 1816. During that summer, snow fell a few times in New England in June. Vermont saw ice on its lakes in June thick enough to skate on, while snow was as deep as 18 to 20 inches, 45 to 50 centimeters, deep. After this bizarrely cold summer, the winter of 1816 to 1817 was rather mild. But that did not matter since the crops were all ruined.
What is the most dangerous U.S. state to live in due to tornadoes?
Massachusetts, because of its population density, has actually seen more deaths and severe injuries from tornadoes than any other U.S. state. However, it is still far riskier to live in Oklahoma, which gets hit by more tornadoes than any other state.
What is the enhanced Fujita scale?
Proposed by the National Weather Service in February 2006, and first put into use on February 1, 2007, the Enhanced Fujita Scale, EFS, was created to better reflect actual damages recorded since the original Fujita scale was developed. Meteorologists have recently concluded that structures could be damaged by tornadic icy winds that were slower than previously thought. The original scale, which was felt to be too general, did not take into careful enough account the different types of construction. And it was hard to evaluate tornadoes that struck in low-populated areas where not many structures were present. The new scale also offers more detailed descriptions of potential damages by using 28 damage indicators that describe building types, structures, and vegetation, accompanied by a degrees of damage scale. Otherwise, the EFS uses the same categories, ranking tornadoes from 0 up to 5.
Who first discovered sunspots?
The earliest recorded observations of sunspots go all the way back to the year 28 CE, when Chinese astronomers made note of dark spots on the sun. In the era of modern, Western civilization, the credit goes to the famous Galileo Galilei, 1564 to 1642. Who first recognized sunspot activity through his telescope in around 1611, sources vary. Crediting the discovering anywhere between 1610 and 1613. Records show that others, including Johannes Kepler, 1571 to 1630, had observed sunspots before Galileo, but they failed to recognize them for what they were. Kepler, for instance, mistook the spot he saw several years before Galileo, as the planet Mercury orbiting in front of the Sun.
Can crickets be used as thermometers?
It has long been known that crickets chirp at different rates depending upon the temperature. While calculating temperatures based on this is not ideal, it can serve in a pinch if you find yourself without a thermometer and provided it's not the dead of winter. The general rule is to count how many times a cricket chirps during a 14-second interval. Add 40 to that figure, and the result is degrees in Fahrenheit. If you have more patience, count the number of chirps over the period of 1 minute. Take the number of chirps you hear, subtract 72, divide by 4, and add the result to 60, which gives you the degrees in Fahrenheit. Chirps, 72/4 plus 60 equals degrees F. For example, if you hear 68 chirps, then 68 minus 72 equals -4, divided by 4 equals -1. Add this to 60 and the result is 59 degrees Fahrenheit.
What was the storm that wouldn't die?
In November 1992, Typhoon Gay lasted for days as it traveled thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean, eventually making landfall in Alaska, British Columbia, and California. At its peak, the storm boasted winds of 200 miles, 322 kilometers per hour. After making landfall in the United States, it continued across the Great Plains, then regained strength as it reached the East Coast. Here, It became a new storm on December 11 with winds of about 90 miles, 145 kilometers per hour.
What is diffraction?
Diffraction is the phenomenon of how light bends around small objects or through small openings. These objects and openings have to be small enough to interfere with wavelengths of light. And so wavelengths in the red spectrum, longer wavelengths, are more affected by light in the bluer spectrum. Diffraction can cause a blurring of light, as well as causing interference in the transmission of invisible energies, such as radio waves and X-rays.
What are near-Earth objects and are they dangerous?
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of NEOs near-Earth objects, which are asteroids with orbits that cross Earth's orbit. And NEO could indeed strike our planet, possibly unleashing cosmic destruction. As of early 2009, astronomers have tracked nearly 6,000 near-Earth objects. Of these, 765 have diameters of more than a mile across, and over 1,000 are considered potentially hazardous asteroids. FOS, meaning that their orbits take them uncomfortably close to Earth.
What is the Storm Prediction Center, SPC?
A part of the National Weather Service and the National Centers for Environmental Prediction. The Storm Prediction Center focuses its efforts on forecasting only hazardous weather, including heavy rains and snows, as well as conditions that could lead to dangerous wildfires.
Do all scientists agree that global warming is caused by human beings?
In short, no, not every scientist believes people create global warming. Although more and more scientists are becoming convinced that we are seeing a significant change in our climate. There are those who argue that it has more to do with solar cycles. Some meteorologists have also noted that, historically, climate warming has preceded increases in carbon dioxide levels, not the other way around. This is because when the Earth warms up, it also warms the oceans, which hold much of the world's carbon dioxide in the form of carbonic acid. When the oceans get warm enough, the carbon dioxide is then released into the atmosphere.
What's the difference between dew point, humidity, and relative humidity?
While humidity and dew point are both measures of the amount of water contained in the air, humidity is measured as a percentage of water/air while dew point is indicated by temperature. The dew point indicates the temperature at which the air would become 100% saturated. The bigger the difference between the dew point and the current temperature, the less humid the air is. It is therefore the same type of measurement as relative humidity. Except that relative humidity is expressed as a percentage and dew point is expressed using temperatures.
What are the westerlies?
These winds flow at mid-latitudes, 30 to 60 degrees north and south of the equator, from west to east around the Earth. The high-altitude winds known as the jet stream are also westerlies.
What is a swamp cooler?
A swamp cooler is an alternative to a traditional air conditioner. A traditional air conditioner uses compressed freon gas to cool the air. This system works very well in most climates where the humidity is above 30%. In drier climates, below 30% humidity, a swamp cooler is very effective. Also called an evaporative cooler, a swamp cooler works sort of like a wet bulb thermometer. Pads inside the cooler absorb water, and a fan then blows on the pads, cooling the air and making it more humid. Swamp coolers are more energy efficient than regular air conditioners because the only electricity needed is what is used for the fan, no compressor is required.
What is an urban ice slab?
Just as urban areas can cause problems related to heat, they also can make winters more hazardous. When ice forms on skyscrapers and other tall buildings, a dangerous situation may arise upon thawing. Large sheets of ice have been known to break off of structures and plummet to the streets below. One notable case of this happening occurred in Chicago, Illinois, in April 1995. When the danger of urban ice slabs dropping onto Michigan Avenue compelled authorities to close the street for hours.
What is hydrology?
Hydrology is the scientific study of Earth's water supplies, how they are distributed, and how they move and change. Hydrologists are people concerned with water resources, and their work has applications ranging from civil engineering and city planning to environmentalism and conservation.
Why is the sunniest place on Earth also the coldest?
Because of the Earth's tilt. Antarctica receives more rays from the sun than any other land mass on the planet. However, because the continent is covered in snow, the white stuff reflects much of that energy back into the atmosphere, 50 to 90% of it, in fact. Thus, Antarctica is extremely cold. This was not always the case, though. Millions of years ago, during the Jurassic period, Antarctica was much closer to the equator. Indeed, scientists are discovering dinosaur fossils there.
What is the worst avalanche disaster on record?
In 1970, an avalanche in Yungay, Peru, killed 20,000 people.
What is the Arctic Oscillation?
Arctic oscillation is a measure of the differences in air pressure between air within the Arctic Circle and air that is between the circle and about 55 degrees north longitude. The Arctic oscillation can be either positive. Air pressure is lower over the Arctic region, or negative, the air pressure is higher. In the case of the former, winds become stronger across mid-latitude regions. Eurasia becomes warmer, and drier conditions prevail in the American West and the Mediterranean. Also, storms move farther north into Alaska and northern Europe. When the Arctic oscillation is negative, the opposite is mainly true. And the American West Coast and the Mediterranean experience wet weather, while Eurasia cools.
Does rain come in any other colors or is it always clear?
Yes, rain showers have occurred consisting of yellow or even reddish droplets. This usually happens when dust storms have seeded clouds heavily with nuclei rich in iron or other minerals. Yellow rain has also been observed as the result of pollens entering into clouds and then being absorbed into raindrops.
Why was tornado forecasting once banned in the United States?
Concerns that warning people about possible tornado formation would panic. Residents led the Weather Bureau to ban such forecasting off and on in the 1940s. As meteorology improved and tornadoes became somewhat less terrifying in their ability to appear suddenly, the ban was lifted in 1950.
What is a rain shadow?
When the moisture in the air is squeezed out by orographic precipitation, there's not much left for the other side of the mountains. The dry side of the mountains experiences a rain shadow effect.
How does the hydrologic cycle work?
The movement of water from the atmosphere to the land, rivers, oceans. and plants and then back into the atmosphere is known as the hydrologic cycle. We can pick an arbitrary point in the cycle to begin our examination. Water in the atmosphere forms clouds or fog and falls, precipitates, to the ground. Water then flows into the ground to nourish plants, or into streams that lead to rivers and then to oceans. Or it can flow into the groundwater, underground sources of water. Over time, water sitting in puddles, rivers, lakes, and oceans is evaporated into the atmosphere. Water in plants is transpired into the atmosphere, too. The process of water moving into the atmosphere is collectively known as evapotranspiration.
What remarkable observation did science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke make?
Arthur C. Clarke, 1917 to 2008, is well known to science fiction fans. His 1948 short story The Sentinel was the basis for the 1968 film 2001, A Space Odyssey. Among his many accomplishments, he was also very interested in satellites. During World War II, Clarke was a radar technician for the Royal Air Force. And in 1945 he proposed designs for a communications system using satellites. He reasoned that this was possible if satellites could be placed in orbit above the equator while traveling 22,248 miles, 35,797 kilometers, per hour. This would put them in geostationary orbit, meaning that each satellite would remain directly above a predetermined point on the Earth's surface. This idea proved correct, and is used now for both communications and weather satellites. The Clarke Belt, a band of space over the equator at an altitude of 22,300 miles, 35,800 kilometers, where geostationary satellites may orbit, is named in his honor.
What is the snow line?
The term snow line can refer to two different things. 1. The elevation on a hill or mountainside above which snow has fallen and below which the precipitation turns to rain. Or 2. The latitude north of which is covered by snow.
Can meteorologists predict tornadoes?
It is difficult to nearly impossible to predict where and whether or not a tornado will strike. All forecasters can do is warn people when conditions are right for tornadoes to form. Or, if one is sighted, to tell people to take shelter. Meteorologists look for tornadic thunderstorms that have strong indications of wind shear, lift, moisture, and instability. No one type of weather pattern leads to tornado formation, which greatly complicates forecasting efforts. To aid in their predictions, meteorologists use all sorts of technology, including weather balloons. Doppler radar, satellites, data from weather stations, lightning strike plots, and computer modeling.
What is seafloor spreading?
Seafloor spreading is one of the processes that helps move the lithospheric plates around the world. The process is slow but continuous, like a hot, bubbling stew on the stove. The even hotter asthenospheric mantle rises to the surface and spreads laterally, transporting oceans and continents as if they were on a slow conveyor belt. This area is usually called a mid-ocean ridge, such as the Mid-Atlantic Ridge system in the Atlantic Ocean. The newly created lithosphere eventually cools as it gets farther from the spreading center. This is why the oceanic lithosphere is youngest at the Miocene ridges and gets progressively older farther away. As it cools, it becomes more dense. Because of this, it rides lower in the underlying asthenosphere, which is why the oceans are deepest away from the spreading centers and more shallow at the mid-ocean ridges. After thousands to millions of years, the cooled area reaches another plate boundary, either subducting, colliding, or rubbing past another plate. If part of the plate subducts, it will eventually be heated and recycled back into the mantle, rising again in millions of years at another or the same spreading center.
We haven't had a nuclear war yet, so what sources are creating radiation pollution?
Man-made radiation in the atmosphere comes from primarily two sources: nuclear weapons testing and leakage from nuclear reactors, the latter mostly a result of nuclear plant accidents. After the United States invented the atomic and hydrogen bombs, there was extensive testing from 1945 through 1968. Over 300 warheads were detonated during that time, mostly in desert regions and on small Pacific islands. The result was huge quantities of radioactive isotopes being spewed into the air, including carbon-14, strontium-90, iodine-131, and cesium-137. While precautions were taken by the military so that no one was killed in the initial blasts, radioactivity in the air traveled on wind currents and poisoned areas hundreds of miles from the tests. For instance, 2 days after a May 1953 test in Nevada, radioactive hail, some stones the size of tennis balls, fell in Washington, D.C. Later, the United States tested nuclear weapons underground in an effort to curtail this air pollution, but, of course, the radioactive wastes of subterranean nuclear explosions can easily make their way into underground water supplies. Other nations, too, have conducted nuclear weapons tests over the years, contributing to the problem.
How is climate change affecting geyser activity?
Geyser activity is affected by rainfall levels and the frequency of earthquakes. In Yellowstone National Park, which is home to about half of the world's 1,000 known geysers, rainfall feeds into the Madison River, which supplies geysers in the park with their water reserves. Less rainfall in times of drought translates into less pressure in the geysers' reservoirs and leads to fewer eruptions. In a recent study of rainfall and climate in Yellowstone, it was found that the amount of water flowing down the Madison River has decreased by about 15% from the years 1998 through 2006. This decrease in rainfall has been blamed on global warming, which has affected precipitation in the surrounding states of Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. The study associated lower rainfalls with an increase in the intervals between eruptions of geysers. For example, Old Faithful used to erupt every 75 minutes, and in 2006 it was erupting every 91 minutes.
What is the National Center for Atmospheric Research, NCAR?
Established by the National Academy of Sciences in 1956, the NCAR is based in Boulder, Colorado, and is staffed by, mostly, university scientists who use such tools as radar, airplanes, and supercomputers to help the scientific community better understand the many processes that affect weather. The goal is to increase cooperation between universities and draw on their combined resources in order to accomplish what a single university could not do on its own.
What is a mesocyclone?
A mesocyclone is the vortex of air usually between 1 to 6 miles, 2 to 10 kilometers in diameter, often found within a supercell or other large thunderstorm with cumulonimbus clouds. Wind shear resulting in abrupt changes in wind direction or speed in the storm causes air to circulate in a rolling fashion parallel to the ground. An updraft can then orient the swirling air vertically, thus forming a vortex perpendicular to the ground.
What is inversion?
When the air temperature rises with altitude rather than cooling, the condition is called an inversion.
Why do flash floods kill so many people?
Simply put, people don't seem to recognize the power of flash floods and the fact that even a half foot of rushing water can knock down an adult and sweep him or her away. Moving flood waters just a few feet deep are capable of pushing cars and small trucks. Floods can either drown you, or they can kill you by carrying deadly debris. The other factor, of course, is that flash floods catch people by surprise. And if they happen at night, those who are sleeping can certainly be caught unawares. Sometimes, too, people can just lack a little common sense. There have been many stories of people who were standing in dry riverbeds when a flash flood suddenly barreled down on them, instead of running up the river bank and to safety. They ran downriver in the vain hope of outrunning the rushing waters. This is how a number of deaths occurred during the 1976 flood that hit Big Thompson, Colorado.
What is a sun pillar?
Sun pillars are streaks of white or reddish light that extend vertically by as much as 20 degrees from the sun. Occurring most often at sunrise and sunset. Like halos and corona, sun pillars are seen because of ice crystals in the atmosphere. In populated areas, when icy fog occurs, sun pillars can sometimes be seen around street lights.
Does water always freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius?
The standard that water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or 0 degrees Celsius, is only true when the air pressure is exactly 1 atmosphere. And when the water is fresh water and not salt water or some other form of water with impurities in it. Salt water, depending on the percent of salinity, freezes at a lower temperature than fresh water. And when the air pressure is greater than 1 atmosphere, the melting point of fresh water is lowered. However, it takes a lot of pressure to make a difference. To lower the freezing point of water to 30 degrees Fahrenheit 1 degree Celsius, you must exert a pressure equal to 134 atmospheres. Because water droplets in clouds must condense around impurities such as dust. They do not necessarily freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit but can remain in a liquid state at temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit -40 degrees Celsius. In other words, the water droplets cannot form ice until they begin to make contact with each other around a nucleus so they can form a crystal lattice. On the other hand, icebergs in the salty oceans are frozen at about the normal freezing point because icebergs are actually formed of fresh water. This happens because ice in the oceans is often formed slowly, allowing the ice crystals to force out impurities such as salt. On the other hand, ice flow sections of the Arctic ice sheet that break away each summer are composed of sea ice. Sea water begins to freeze at 28 degrees Fahrenheit -2 degrees Celsius when there is no surface turbulence. Another interesting property of ice on frozen lakes or in skating rinks is how friction makes ice skating possible. It was once believed that the pressure of an ice skate blade against the ice surface changed the state of the water from solid to liquid, thus creating a slippery surface on which to glide. More recently, it has been concluded that it is the friction of the blade against the ice that melts it and makes ice skating possible.
What major energy source is considered to be the cleanest?
Natural gas is regarded as the cleanest burning fossil fuel, producing less pollution than oil or coal.
Where is the horizon?
Depending on your elevation above sea level and assuming no objects such as mountains are obscuring your view and the sky is perfectly clear, the horizon appears at different distances. To calculate how far the visible horizon is, first measure the distance between the ground and your eye level. Add to this the measurement of how high your elevation is. If your total is in feet, multiply by 1.5 and then take the square root of the result, which will be in miles, if you used meters as your measuring unit. Multiply by 13 and then take the square root, the result will be in kilometers.
What is emergency response planning?
Most disasters in the United States, about 85%, occur because of the weather, with the rest due to such geologic events as volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, or acts of terrorism. In an effort to minimize the costs of such tragedies, a system connecting federal, state, and local agencies has been established to issue weather warnings, plan evacuation routes, and coordinate relief efforts. Community awareness programs, building code enforcement, and computer modeling are all employed in this effort, with meteorologists naturally playing a key role.
Who first proposed the approach of numerical weather prediction?
Wilhelm Bjerknes, 1862–1951, a Norwegian physicist and meteorologist, was the author of the first formal studies on weather forecasting. He was also famous for his seminal 1921 book, On the Dynamics of the Circular Vortex, with applications to the atmosphere and to atmospheric vortex and wave motion, which proposed the fundamental ideas behind numerical weather prediction in 1904. The theory was picked up again in 1922 by English mathematician and meteorologist Lewis F. Richardson. 1881–1953, the mathematics behind Bjerknes's theory appealed to Richardson, but the calculations necessary to come up with the predictions, in a time before the invention of the computer, were formidable. Richardson estimated it would take a coordinated effort of about 26,000 people using calculators to figure out the math fast enough for the numerical method to work. Trying to do some preliminary calculations himself, Richardson's early attempts at weather predictions were far off the mark. His misunderstanding of some of Bjerknes's numerical methods led him to come up with estimates on air pressure that were far too high. Because of Richardson's failure, numerical weather prediction was abandoned until the 1940s.
How hard is it to become a meteorologist who is a radio or television broadcaster?
If your goal is to specifically become a television weatherman or weatherwoman, then, ideally, you need to combine training in meteorology with education in communications and/or the broadcast arts. You should be comfortable appearing on camera. And it helps if you have completed an internship in broadcasting while in school. As with anyone who wishes to pursue a television or radio career, you will have to sell yourself as an appealing on-air personality. Prepare professional demo tapes of yourself doing a broadcast and send these to news directors at the stations for which you wish to work. You should prepare yourself to start at the bottom of the career ladder, which means working shifts in the very early morning or very late evening hours, as well as working for low pay in a town or city that has a small market. Don't expect to work right away for a big network in New York City or Los Angeles. It could be years before you manage to get a job in a big market. And in the meantime you will likely move frequently while you search for better and better opportunities. Today's media world is especially challenging, as stations and newspapers across the United States are cutting their budgets and centralizing operations. Weather broadcasting is probably the hardest specialty to get into these days. And many other fields within meteorology offer better opportunities.
What is evapotranspiration?
Evapotranspiration is the combination of water vapor being evaporated from the surface of the Earth, such as from lakes, rivers, or puddles, into the atmosphere. And transpiration, which is the movement of water from plants to the air.
What unexpected cooling phenomena are happening because of global warming?
It might be counterintuitive, but as the globe seems to warm, temperature readings indicate summer maximum temperatures are on the decline. However, at the same time, winter minimum temperatures are on the rise, so that the overall average has been an increase in temperature. Meanwhile, up in the stratosphere, the temperature has been cooling even as surface temperatures warm up. The reason for this is the destruction of ozone gases, which absorb ultraviolet radiation, which generates heat. The less ozone, the more UV radiation gets through the stratosphere, so it does not have as much of a chance to warm up. Records taken since 1979 show that 3 of the coldest stratospheric readings have been in 1997, 2000, and 2006.
What petition have thousands of scientists signed that says that global warming is not caused by people?
Over 31,000 American scientists have signed the global warming petition, which states that global warming is not caused by human activities, that there are actually many benefits to having a warmer planet, and that the United States should continue to reject the Kyoto Protocol. Looking at trends in such areas as ocean temperatures, solar activity, glacier shrinkage, and severe storm events. These scientists assert that upwards trends in all of these areas have been occurring since the 1800s. They believe, therefore, that policies limiting industrial and economic development are misplaced.
Why does my nose run when I'm cold?
When you inhale cold air, it causes the mucous membranes in your nose to constrict and then dilate. This reflexive action encourages the formation of mucus and a drizzly nose. After a while, however, the body adjusts to the colder temperatures and the sniffles should stop.
How much ice is there covering Antarctica and Greenland?
Most of the world's fresh water is stored in the form of ice. Covering the continent of Antarctica, an amazing 70%. Furthermore, 90% of all the Earth's ice is also found in the southernmost continent. The ice covering Antarctica is as much as 2 miles, 3.2 kilometers, thick in places. Scientists have found that the ice is getting deeper in the central part of the continent, while on the outer edges it seems to be melting. Although scientists do not understand why yet, the ice on the western side of the continent seems to be getting thicker overall, while in the east it is getting thinner. Overall, the total amount of ice appears to be at stable levels. In contrast to ice in the northern hemisphere, it is difficult to say how much ice is covering Greenland, because there it is melting so quickly. In the late 1990s, the large island had an ice cap that contained about 720,000 cubic miles. 3 million cubic kilometers, of ice. At that time, the ice was melting at a rate of about 21.6 cubic miles, 90 cubic kilometers, per year. As of 2005, that rate has increased to 36 cubic miles, 150 cubic kilometers.
What is the Ring of Fire?
There is a circular region that surrounds the Pacific Ocean where volcanic activity is particularly high. This is known as the Ring of Fire and includes coastal areas in Japan, Russia, Alaska, Canada, Oregon, Washington State, California, Mexico, Southeast Asia, and many South Pacific islands. The ring stretches some 40,000 miles, 64,000 kilometers, and includes 3/4 of the planet's volcanoes. Among those are Mt. St. Helens and recently active volcanoes in Alaska, such as Mount Spur, which erupted in 1992, and Mt. Redoubt, which erupted March 22, 2009, near Anchorage.
Why is it impossible to find a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow?
Even if there were a pot of gold at the end of a rainbow, you could never reach it because the rainbow moves away from you as you approach it. The rainbow will always be positioned opposite the azimuth of the sun.
What changes in plant and bird behavior are indicating global warming?
People are noticing that spring is coming earlier, flowers bloom sooner, and summer has been lasting longer than in previous years, sometimes by a difference of 1 or more weeks. Bird migrations north and south have also changed, with bird watchers seeing species increasingly in northern climates where they have not before ventured. In North America, mammals such as possums and armadillos are also increasing their northern ranges. And a bit more worrisome insects such as fire ants and Africanized bees are also moving north.
What is the Fujita and Pearson tornado scale?
The Fujita and Pearson tornado scale, usually just referred to as the Fujita scale, was introduced in 1971 by University of Chicago professor T. Theodore Fujita, 1920 to 1998, and Alan Pearson, 1925. Who was then the director of the National Severe Storms Forecast Center. The scale ranked tornadoes by their wind speed, path, length, and width. The ranking ranges from F0, very weak, to F5, incredibly destructive. This scale was replaced in 2007 by the enhanced Fujita scale.
Do tornadoes always turn counterclockwise?
As a rule of thumb, a tornado in the northern hemisphere will rotate counterclockwise, while those in the southern hemisphere twist in a clockwise rotation. But, as with any rule, there are always exceptions. Anticyclonic tornadoes, rotating clockwise in the northern hemisphere, have occasionally been observed. When they do, they are typically weaker twisters associated with weak storm cells or sometimes appearing as waterspouts. One of the strongest anticyclonic tornadoes was observed in 1998 near Sunnyvale, California. Even rarer but still possible is an event when a supercell generates both cyclonic and anticyclonic tornadoes.
How bad was the blizzard of 1888?
after a severe blizzard hit the high plains of the United States in February 1888, causing the deaths of many people and farm animals. An even more destructive blizzard wreaked havoc on the East Coast from Maine to Chesapeake Bay from March 11 to 14. Several feet of snow fell all over the region, and in Saratoga Springs, New York, 52 inches, 1.32 meters, of snow fell, and there were drifts of up to 52 feet, 16 meters, deep. Wind speeds ranged up to 70 miles, 113 kilometers, per hour. By the time the storm was over, more than 400 people had lost their lives.
What is Gay-Lussac's law and why is it important in meteorology?
Joseph Louis Gay-Lussac, 1778 to 1850. Was a French physicist and chemist best known for two laws of physics about gases. One of these laws states that, in chemical reactions, gases combine in simple ratios according to volume. For example, it takes two carbon monoxide molecules, Co, to combine with one oxygen molecule, O2, to create carbon dioxide, CO2. This became known as Gay-Lussac's law and is important for understanding chemical reactions of gases within our atmosphere. Gay-Lussac also published a law about gas expansion by volume occurring linearly as a function of temperature. Sometimes credited as another of Gay-Lussac's laws, it is more correctly called Charles's law. And Gay-Lussac was one of those who gave credit where it was due. It was discovered by another French physicist, Jacques-Alexandre César Charles, 1746 to 1823, who was also a mathematician. Charles found that gases such as oxygen and nitrogen increased their volume by 1/273 for every 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature. From this, he extrapolated the possibility that, at absolute zero, -273 degrees Celsius, or -459.4 degrees Fahrenheit, the volume of a gas would also be zero. Both scientists were also balloonists, which was handy, given their interest in the atmosphere.
What gases and chemicals are considered to have the greatest effect on global warming?
Anything that increases carbon dioxide, CO2, levels is a risk factor in heating up the planet. In addition to CO2, methane gas, CH4, and chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, are culprits in global warming. Methane, from livestock, coal mining, and also natural sources like peat bogs and termites decomposing wood, is actually 25 times more effective in holding heat within our atmosphere. And CFCs are 20,000 times more efficient than CO2. Methane gases during the 1990s were rising at an annual rate of about 0.8%. From 1997 to 2007, however, methane levels stabilized. and scientists believed that a balance had been reached between production of methane gas and its rate of dissipation in the atmosphere. In 2007, however, a sudden spike in methane levels was noted. Especially in the northern hemisphere, for reasons not well understood. Theories include the idea that global warming increased methane production from wetlands bacteria, i.e., the result of melting permafrost, especially in Siberia, or that the amount of O hydroxyl free radical, which breaks down methane, is decreasing in the atmosphere. Today, the amount of methane in the air is more than twice what it was before the Industrial Revolution. About 1,775 parts per billion versus about 700 parts per billion. The current rate of increase for methane is about 10 parts per billion annually, which is considered a significant spike. Meanwhile, because of government regulations, CFC levels have been steadily decreasing in the atmosphere, which is particularly good news for the ozone layer.
Where can I get an education in meteorology?
There are numerous colleges and universities throughout the United States and the world where you can earn a degree in meteorology. The American Meteorological Society publishes information on this in its curricula in the atmospheric, oceanic, hydrological, and related sciences, which can be accessed online at http://www.amitsoc.org. The U.S. military also provides training to interested recruits. Online and correspondence courses may be found, too. But these should be viewed more for informational purposes and not for a formal education. Unless the online courses are provided by a degree-conferring, accredited university.
What is the SPF system?
The Sun Protection Factor, or SPF, rates sunscreens based on how much they shield your skin from ultraviolet radiation. Depending on your skin pigmentation and age. An SPF rating of somewhere between 30 and 50 is usually recommended for any lengthy amount of time in the sun. And children, especially, should use higher SPF rated sunscreens. Sunscreen should be applied about a half hour before going outside. If you are unsure about what sunscreen to use, a good idea is to ask your physician or pharmacist.
How was the existence of neutrinos proven?
The existence of neutrinos was first suggested in 1930 by the Austrian physicist Wolfgang Pauli, 1900 to 1958. He noticed that in a type of radioactive process called beta decay, the range of the total energy given off in observations was greater than theoretical predictions. He reasoned that there must be another type of particle present to account for and carry away some of this energy. Since the amounts of energy were so tiny, the hypothetical particle must be very tiny as well and have no electric charge. A few years later, the Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, 1901 to 1954, coined the name neutrino for this enigmatic particle. The existence of neutrinos was not experimentally confirmed, however, until 1956, when American physicists Clyde L. Cowan, Jr., 1919 to 1974, and Frederick Raines, 1918 to 1998, detected neutrinos at a special nuclear facility in Savannah River, South Carolina.
Why is Greenland called green when it is mostly covered in ice?
When Scandinavian explorers first discovered the large island north of Iceland in the late 10th century, they wished to attract more settlers to the land, and so they named it Greenland, according to some sources. Another explanation is that the island was actually named Gruntland, the word grunt meaning shallow bay. The name was later mistranslated on maps, becoming Greenland. While much of the island is inhospitably covered by a huge glacier, the southern coastline does actually have vegetation and has served as good fishing ground. The Little Ice Age of the 15th century decimated the Viking settlements, however.
How much of the Earth is usually covered by clouds?
At any given time, about 1/2 of the planet is covered by clouds.